the 25th of May 2026. Ouagadougou, at the Ministry of Agriculture, officials gathered around a shipment worth more than 160 million CFA francs, roughly $280,000. There were tractors, seeders, tillers, threshers, improved seeds, fertilizer and equipment for testing agricultural quality. At first glance, it looked like another development ceremony, another diplomatic photograph, another promise of cooperation. But look closer. Across the same country, Chinese armored vehicles, self-propelled motors, rocket systems, command vehicles, and military trucks were also entering service. One shipment was meant to help farmers cultivate the land. The other was meant to help soldiers defend it. And together, they reveal something much larger than aid, trade, or weapons. They reveal a national strategy. Captain Ibrahim Traore is trying to answer a question that has haunted Burkina Faso for generations. How can a country call itself independent if it cannot feed its people, process its own resources, defend its roads, or maintain the machines it imports? That question is why the relationship between Burkina Faso and China matters. It is not simply about replacing France with Beijing. It is not about declaring one foreign power good and another evil. It is about whether Burkina Faso can use foreign partnerships without surrendering control of its future. If these conversations about African sovereignty matter to you, subscribe and stay with us, because the most important part of this story is not what China is giving. It is what Burkina Faso may become capable of doing for itself. The diplomatic relationship between Burkina Faso and the People's Republic of China was restored in 2018, 4 years before Traore came to power. He did not create this partnership. What he changed was its purpose. Under his leadership, cooperation with China has been placed inside a broader project built around food security, industrialization, military strength, regional cooperation, and national control over resources. The goal is not merely to receive more equipment. The goal is to convert equipment into lasting capacity. That distinction matters. A tractor is useful, but real independence begins when local technicians can repair it. A factory creates jobs, but real industrial power begins when Burkinabe engineers can operate, improve, and eventually reproduce its technology. An armored vehicle can protect soldiers, but military sovereignty begins when the country can maintain it, supply it, and deploy it without waiting for foreign approval. This is the logic behind Traore's approach to China. He is not searching for a savior. He's searching for leverage. China offers access to machinery, construction companies, training programs, a vast consumer market, and military equipment that Western partners were often unwilling to provide without political conditions. For a government determined to diversify its alliances, that combination is highly attractive. But attraction is not the same as control, and partnership is not the same as independence. The real test is whether Burkina Faso can transform access into ownership, training into expertise, imports into production, and cooperation into sovereignty. That is where the promise and the danger of this partnership begin today. The strategy Ibrahim Traore is pursuing cannot be understood by looking at military deliveries alone, nor can it be understood by looking only at agricultural donations or trade statistics. Every major decision made since he assumed leadership points toward the same objective: reducing Burkina Faso's dependence by strengthening the country's own productive capacity. That explains why his government often speaks about sovereignty in broader terms than many outside observers expect. Sovereignty is not simply about controlling borders. It also means controlling food supplies, industrial production, transportation networks, energy, education, and the ability to finance national priorities without relying entirely on external powers. From that perspective, China is not viewed as an ideological partner. It is viewed as a practical one. Unlike many traditional development models that focus primarily on financial assistance, Chinese cooperation in Burkina Faso increasingly combines infrastructure, agricultural modernization, technical training, manufacturing opportunities, and access to one of the world's largest consumer markets. For Traore's government, these elements fit into a long-term vision that extends well beyond short-term political survival. Take agriculture as an example. Food security is no longer treated simply as a social policy. It has become part of national security. The donation of agricultural equipment announced in May 2026 included tractors, power tillers, seeders, mowers, threshers, animal production equipment, laboratory materials for seed analysis, improved seeds, and fertilizer. More importantly, it was not presented as a one-time gift. It formed part of the third phase of the China-Burkina Faso Agricultural Cooperation Program. Previous phases had already supported thousands of agricultural workers through technical training. Chinese specialists introduced rice cultivation techniques, seed improvement methods, post-harvest preservation, and Junkao technology, while assisting the development of thousands of hectares of lowland farming. Additional support was planned for irrigation systems, fish ponds, boreholes, and laboratory modernization. Viewed separately, these projects appear relatively modest. Viewed together, they begin to resemble an agricultural modernization strategy. The logic is straightforward. A farmer with improved seeds produces more crops. Mechanization reduces labor costs. Better storage decreases post-harvest losses. Modern laboratories improve seed quality. Reliable irrigation reduces dependence on unpredictable rainfall. Technical training allows local experts to continue improving productivity long after foreign advisors leave. Each component reinforces the others, but Traore's larger objective does not stop at producing more food. His administration repeatedly emphasizes adding value before export. Growing cotton is only the first step. Processing cotton into yarn creates more income. Turning yarn into fabric creates even greater value. Producing finished garments generates additional employment, tax revenue, industrial knowledge, and export opportunities. The same principle applies to sesame, rice, mangoes, livestock products, and many other sectors. This represents one of the most significant differences between exporting raw materials and building an industrial economy. Raw materials create income once. Processing creates value repeatedly. That is precisely why agricultural policy and industrial policy have become increasingly interconnected under Traore's leadership. The ultimate goal is not simply to harvest more. It is to ensure that a larger share of the economic value remains inside Burkina Faso. Agriculture, however, is only one pillar of the partnership. The second pillar is trade. For decades, Burkina Faso exported commodities while importing products with far greater added value. Gold left the country, cotton left the country, sesame, mangoes, and livestock products left the country. Much of the value generated after processing remained somewhere else. The Traore administration wants to change that equation. One reason is China's decision to expand zero tariff access for African exports. By opening its market to products from African countries with diplomatic relations, Beijing created an opportunity that few major economies had previously offered on such a scale. An open market, however, is only an opportunity. Whether that opportunity becomes prosperity depends entirely on what Burkina Faso is capable of exporting. Imagine two different futures. In the first, Burkina Faso exports raw cotton. Chinese factories transform that cotton into textiles, manufacture clothing, and sell finished products around the world. Burkina Faso earns income from the harvest, but most of the value, technology, employment, and industrial expertise remain elsewhere. In the second future, Burkina Faso spins the cotton into yarn, weaves fabric in domestic factories, manufactures garments locally, and exports finished products directly to international buyers, including China. The same cotton now supports factory workers, engineers, logistics, companies, designers, transport businesses, tax revenues, and industrial growth inside Burkina Faso. The difference is not created by tariffs alone. It is created by industrial capacity. This explains why Chinese investment in infrastructure is becoming increasingly important within Traore's broader development strategy. Roads move goods faster. Reliable electricity keeps factories operating. Solar energy reduces production costs. Modern warehouses protect agricultural products from spoilage. Industrial zones attract manufacturers. Transportation corridors connect producers with export markets. Each investment supports another. The objective is not simply to increase trade volume. The objective is to change the structure of trade itself. Instead of exporting raw materials and importing finished products, Burkina Faso hopes to export products carrying much higher added value. That transition is neither automatic nor guaranteed. Factories require skilled workers. Industrial equipment requires maintenance. Export industries require stable electricity, financing, logistics, banking services, certification systems, and competitive transportation costs. Without these supporting conditions, zero tariff access alone cannot transform an economy. This is precisely why Chinese cooperation extends beyond buying commodities. Training programs, technology exchanges, agricultural modernization, industrial investment, and infrastructure development all serve a common purpose when viewed through Traore's strategy. The vision is ambitious: build productive farms, connect them to modern processing industries, link those industries to international markets, then allow export earnings to finance education, infrastructure, healthcare, and national security. If successful, Burkina Faso would gradually retain a far greater share of the wealth generated by its own natural resources. That possibility explains why many supporters describe the current partnership as an opportunity, unlike previous economic relationships. Whether it ultimately becomes a genuine transformation or simply another version of external dependence depends on what happens inside Burkina Faso during the years ahead. Economic sovereignty cannot survive without security. Factories cannot operate if highways are constantly under attack. Farmers cannot harvest crops if they are forced to abandon their fields. Investors will not build manufacturing plants if supply routes remain vulnerable. Every development strategy eventually reaches the same conclusion. Without security, long-term economic growth becomes almost impossible. This is where the military dimension of Ibrahim Traore's strategy becomes inseparable from his economic agenda. Many international headlines focus on weapons deliveries as though they represent a race for military power. The reality is more complex. Burkina Faso is attempting to rebuild a military that can protect roads, secure farming communities, defend infrastructure, and restore enough stability for economic activity to resume. But that helps explain why recent Chinese military cooperation has covered far more than rifles or ammunition. Instead, it has included a broad range of equipment designed to improve mobility, protection, logistics, command, and fire support. Among the most discussed systems are the VN-22B armored fighting vehicles, designed to transport troops across dangerous terrain while offering greater protection against ambushes. Mine-resistant vehicles such as the CS, VP-14 and VP-11 provide additional security against improvised explosive devices, one of the most persistent threats facing military convoys throughout the Sahel. Armored personnel carriers such as the CS-VN9 increase the military's ability to move soldiers rapidly between operational areas. Fire support vehicles like the WMA-301 provide heavier direct fire capabilities during combat operations. The PLL-05 self-propelled mortar combines mobility with indirect fire support, allowing units to respond more quickly without relying entirely on fixed artillery positions. Then there is the SR-5 multiple rocket launcher. It is frequently described online as a revolutionary weapon capable of changing the balance of power overnight. That description is misleading. The SR-5 is certainly a modern and flexible artillery system capable of delivering powerful long-range fire support, but no rocket system wins a war by itself. Its effectiveness depends on intelligence. It depends on reconnaissance. It depends on trained crews. It depends on logistics. It depends on communications. Most importantly, it depends on accurate identification of legitimate military targets. Without those elements, even the most advanced weapons become expensive machines with limited strategic value. The same principle applies to every armored vehicle delivered to Burkina Faso. A protected vehicle is only useful if mechanics can maintain it. Fuel must be available. Replacement parts must arrive on time. Drivers require continuous training. Commanders need reliable communications. Medical evacuation teams must accompany operations. Military modernization is therefore not a single purchase. It is an entire ecosystem. That is why recent cooperation has also included command vehicles, transport trucks, maintenance support, training programs, and technical exchanges alongside combat equipment. Viewed together, these deliveries reveal a much broader objective than simply increasing firepower. They are intended to improve the armed forces' ability to move faster, survive longer, coordinate more effectively, and sustain operations across one of the world's most challenging security environments. For Traore, military modernization is not presented as an alternative to development. It is presented as one of the conditions required to make development possible. By this point, an important question begins to emerge. What if Burkina Faso succeeds in strengthening its military but fails to transform its economy? That question deserves serious attention because history offers many examples of countries that acquired modern weapons without building lasting prosperity. Military strength alone cannot guarantee national independence if the economy remains dependent on exporting raw materials and importing almost everything else. This is why the greatest opportunity facing Burkina Faso is also its greatest challenge. China's expanding partnership provides access to markets, machinery, infrastructure, financing, technical knowledge, and security cooperation. Those opportunities are real, but opportunities do not automatically become development. Consider the policy of zero tariff access. For many observers, it sounds revolutionary, and in many ways it is giving African products access to one of the world's largest consumer markets removes a significant barrier that many developing countries have faced for decades. Yet, tariffs have never been the only obstacle. Suppose Burkina Faso exports raw sesame seeds. Chinese companies clean them, package them, process them into cooking, oil or food ingredients, and then sell finished products internationally. Burkina Faso receives payment for agricultural production, but the higher value activities remain elsewhere. Now imagine a different scenario. The sesame is cleaned, processed, bottled, packaged, and branded inside Burkina Faso. Engineers maintain the machinery. Local companies manufacture packaging materials. Transportation firms deliver finished products to ports. Marketing specialists develop export brands recognized across Asia. The economic impact becomes dramatically larger. The same principle applies to cotton. It applies to gold. It applies to mangoes. It applies to livestock products. Every natural resource follows the same economic rule. The more value that is added before export, the greater the long-term benefit for the producing country. That is why industrialization occupies such an important place in Ibrahim Traore's vision. Factories create far more than products. They create technical skills. They train supervisors. They generate tax revenue. They encourage engineering education. They support transportation companies. They stimulate financial services. They attract suppliers. Entire industrial ecosystems gradually emerge around successful manufacturing sectors. This transformation, however, cannot happen simply because another country is willing to invest. Domestic institutions matter just as much. Reliable electricity remains essential. Efficient customs procedures reduce export costs. Transparent regulations encourage private investment. Vocational schools produce skilled workers. Universities educate engineers. Banks provide financing for local entrepreneurs. Road networks connect rural producers with industrial centers. Without these supporting systems, foreign investment often creates isolated projects instead of a self-sustaining economy. That is why the success of Burkina Faso's partnership with China will ultimately be measured by outcomes that have little to do with diplomatic ceremonies. How many factories remain operating after 10 years? How many Burkinabe engineers replace foreign technicians? How many agricultural products are exported as finished goods instead of raw commodities? How many small businesses become suppliers to larger industries? How much technology stays inside the country after foreign experts return home? These are the questions that will determine whether today's cooperation becomes genuine economic transformation or simply another chapter in Africa's long struggle against external dependence. The future will not be decided by the number of agreements that are signed. It will be decided by the productive capacity that Burkina Faso is able to build with them. The opportunities are significant, but no serious discussion about Burkina Faso's future is complete without addressing the criticisms that have emerged from Western governments, international organizations, and parts of the global media. Some of these criticisms deserve careful consideration. Others deserve equally careful scrutiny. One of the most common arguments is that Burkina Faso risks replacing one dependency with another. According to this view, distancing itself from France and other traditional partners only creates room for China to become the country's new dominant external influence. It is an understandable concern. China finance infrastructure. Chinese companies build roads. Chinese manufacturers supply agricultural equipment. Chinese farms purchase commodities. Chinese defense industries provide military hardware. When viewed separately, each activity appears beneficial. Combined together, however, critics argue that they could eventually create economic dependence if Burkina Faso lacks the capacity to negotiate balanced agreements. That possibility cannot simply be dismissed. If foreign companies control extraction, construction, maintenance, financing, and technology, while local industries remain weak, dependency can survive under a different flag. But there is another side to the argument that is often overlooked. Every major power pursues its own interests. France pursued economic interests. The United States pursues strategic interests. Russia pursues geopolitical influence. China pursues markets, resources, investment opportunities, and diplomatic partnerships. None of these relationships exist without national interests. The critical question, therefore, is not whether China benefits. Of course, it does. The real question is whether Burkina Faso benefits enough to justify the partnership. That answer depends less on Beijing than on Ouagadougou. If Burkina Faso negotiates contracts that require technology transfer, local employment, engineering education, supplier development, and domestic processing, Chinese investment can accelerate industrial growth. If those conditions are absent, the country may simply continue exporting raw materials while importing finished products. Another criticism concerns debt. Some analysts warn that developing countries accepting major infrastructure financing may accumulate obligations that become difficult to repay. History certainly provides examples of poorly managed borrowing, not only from China but also from commercial lenders, multilateral institutions, and Western government. Debt itself is not the problem. Unproductive debt is a loan used to build infrastructure that supports industry, exports, and economic growth can strengthen national development. A loan financing projects with little long-term value can become a burden regardless of who provides it. Military cooperation has generated another important debate. Supporters argue that no country can develop while armed groups continue attacking villages, roads, schools, and agricultural communities. Critics respond that military modernization must always be accompanied by transparency, professional discipline, respect for civilians, and accountability under the law. Both arguments contain important truths. Security is essential for development, but security also depends upon public trust. If military operations successfully protect communities, reopen transportation corridors, and allow farmers to return to their land, security cooperation strengthens national resilience. If force is applied without accountability, long-term stability becomes much harder to achieve. Perhaps the most balanced lesson is this: neither China nor the West will determine Burkina Faso's future. Foreign partners can provide opportunities. Only Burkina Faso can decide how those opportunities are used. Everything we have discussed leads to one final question. What will history remember about this moment? Will it remember that Burkina Faso bought new military equipment? Will it remember another series of foreign investment agreements? Or will it remember this period as the moment when a country decided to redefine what sovereignty actually means? Captain Ibrahim Traore has repeatedly argued that political independence is incomplete without economic independence. His strategy reflects that belief. Agriculture is expected to feed the nation. Industry is expected to create value before export. Infrastructure is expected to connect producers with markets. The military is expected to provide the security necessary for every other sector to function. These are not separate ambitions. They are different parts of the same national project. Whether that project succeeds will depend on decisions made inside Burkina Faso rather than promises made abroad. Can schools produce enough engineers? Can vocational centers train enough technicians? Can local companies become suppliers instead of merely customers? Can government institutions negotiate transparent contracts? Can industries compete internationally after foreign experts leave? Can farmers, entrepreneurs, researchers, and soldiers work toward the same long-term objective? Those questions matter far more than the nationality of any foreign partner. China has opened important opportunities. It has offered agricultural cooperation, infrastructure investment, technical training, expanded trade, and military equipment. These contributions are significant, but opportunities alone never guarantee transformation. Only productive capacity does. If Burkina Faso succeeds in processing its own cotton before export, refining more of its natural resources, modernizing agriculture, training its own specialists, maintaining its own equipment, and building competitive industries, then today's cooperation may become one of the defining chapters in the country's modern history. If it fails to do those things, foreign partnerships, regardless of whether they come from China, Europe, Russia, or elsewhere, will simply reproduce another cycle of dependency under different circumstances. That is why this story is much larger than China. It is much larger than France. It is even larger than Ibrahim Traore himself. It is about whether African nations can transform external partnerships into internal strength. For Burkina Faso, that journey is still unfolding. Its final outcome has not yet been written. Perhaps that is the most important lesson for the entire continent. Real sovereignty cannot be imported. It must be built one factory at a time, one farm at a time, one skilled engineer at a time, one secure community at a time. That is the vision many supporters associate with Captain Ibrahim Traore and the broader ideals of Pan-Africanism. Whether Burkina Faso can turn that vision into lasting reality will shape not only its own future, but also conversations across the African Union and the wider African New movement. As Pan-African voices continue debating the country's path, one fact remains clear. Lasting independence will be measured not by speeches, but by the nation's ability to create prosperity, security, and opportunity through its own strength. If this discussion has given you a new perspective on Burkina Faso and Africa's changing future, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and join us for more conversations about the ideas shaping the continent's next chapter. Thank you for being here and watching our video. Every piece of content on this channel is carefully researched, written, edited, and reviewed by our team to ensure it reflects our own work and editorial approach. We do not rely on automated mass production. Each video presents our perspective on current events related to President Ibrahim Traore and developments across Africa.